today, we've got kind of a tried and true format for this. So we're going to start by going over the course. We'll use the CalTopo maps. We'll just kind of go through the main sections, talk about some of the unique features, some of the big cruxes you'll encounter. After that, depending on how long that takes, we'll jump into talking about the required gear. There's the two lists that we have to go through that you need to be aware of. We've also got two great guests coming on today. We've got Bill Dittman, previous high-low finisher, and Lauren they're both from Maurten. They're going to talk a little bit specifically about Maurten because that's the products we have at our aid station. So for folks not familiar, they'll kind of talk about the real high-level stuff of, a little bit about the technology, a little bit about how to use it, and then just general nutrition impressions. So they're a great resource. So we'll do about 15 minutes on that. Then we'll jump into a Q&A with a couple of our veterans. So we've got Kevin Canaday, Silke Coaster, and Suzanne Eller, who are going to jump on today. And they've all finished multiple times, kind of across all different speeds. So they're a great resource. After that, we'll kind of just wrap up with a few other, I won't call them random, but they're sort of faster things. So we'll talk about pace prediction, talk about the snowpack and what that can mean for how this year is going to run. We'll talk a little bit about crews and pacers, drop bags, and some other kind of random logistics like that. And that's kind of it. And then at the end, we'll take some questions and can answer anything that we missed. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let me share a screen. All right. So this is the Lonesome 100. If you're wanting to follow along on your browser, the map I'm using is on the Lonesome website. So if you just go to the main page, click on course up here at the top, and then scroll down, you've got all the information I'm going to be using today. It's also got the embedded map right here. If you want to open it in CalTopo, you just click this button up here. Otherwise, you can zoom and navigate on the actual website. It's also got the cutoffs and the elevation profile, which will kind of be helpful to have at your disposal. But I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this because I can navigate a little bit better on it. So the red line is the race. The blue lines are crew access. So you can kind of just ignore these blue lines for now. The race starts right up here in this little field just above the Mount Princeton Hot Springs. So for context, Buena Vista is right here on the north end of the valley. So if you're staying there, the race starts just below you. Down here is Salida. These are the two main towns that the valley encompasses. There's a few smaller ones. There's Poncha Springs just right here. And then there's a little one called Nathrop, which is technically where the race starts. So everything's about a 30-minute drive from Buena Vista to Salida. From BV, it's about a 10-minute drive to the start line. From Salida, it's about a 30-minute drive to the start line. It's a large field. I'll show you what it looks like on a satellite. That's it. So we rent this from the state, so it's actually private property, but we have the recreation lease on it. This map is available on Avenza for when you actually show up. So if you're camping and whatnot, you can use it. For now, the main thing to know is when you come in, there's parking people and everything, but you'll park over here and then you'll walk to the north to get to the actual starting chute. This is where the gear check is going to be, where the start finish line is, aid stations, all that jazz. When the gun goes off, you run on the field all the way out until you pick up pavement. And then from here, you run downhill on this big switchback called Swear Hill. It's only Swear Hill on the return, though. On the way down, it's super fun. No one cares. And there's this massive hot springs resort. You can actually see the pools and the water slides. So you run past that, you do a little turn, and you keep running along pavement until you get to about right here. And this is about 2 some miles in, where you turn off pavement and you go onto the gravel roads. And you're on that for a little less than a mile. This is a really gradual, gentle climb. It's an old railroad grade, so it's nice and chill. And then right here at 3.75 miles, you turn left onto the Colorado Trail and pick up single track. So everything up into that point is super chill. It's actually a really nice section. It lets people spread out, so it's not as bad of a conga line once you guys hit single track. It's also a nice way to just kind of warm up the legs. Once you hit the single track, though, you're straight into business. There's this big climb. It's about 800, 900 punchy feet. You get up on this little ridge, and then after that, it's really cruiser single track into Raspberry, and that's about 7.3-ish miles. Raspberry to Antero is one of the 3 big mile jumps that you have to cover. So it's over 10 miles. So you need to make sure you've got everything you need to go 10 miles when you leave Raspberry. On Raspberry outbound, because you come back through this same spot. On outbound, people are usually in and out really fast. Just fill up some water, grab a gel or 2, and off you go. There's no crew access here on the first time. Your crew can be here on the way home, though. So you'll blast through Raspberry, and you got some really fun single track. It's super, super smooth, flowy single track for about 2 miles outside of Raspberry. And then you hit your start of the climb. And this climb doesn't end until you hit 13,000 feet. So it's just some version of up. It's either up a little or up a lot. You'll climb through the CT until you hit this junction. And here's one of the first confusing things on the race course. So there's these 2 canyons. This top one is Little Browns, and it's what the race uses. Right below it is Browns, regular Browns, big Browns, whatever the hell you want to call it, but it's not Little Browns. And so it's not uncommon for people to get confused and think they're the same thing, but they're actually different. Little Browns is much steeper, much more rugged, and more technical. It's also just a straighter, faster climb because you're just covering the same amount of vert, because they do meet up together. They actually meet up right here at the high point. Regardless, the junctions for them are really close together, and they're signed really, really well. And we have a marshal there, so it's hard to get lost. But make sure you're familiar with that. Once you start up Little Browns, it's one of my favorite trails in the valley. It's a gorgeous climb. You're along a creek. The creek actually is up on the surface and then goes subterranean and then comes back up on the surface and goes subterranean. So it's a really cool area. As you hit tree line, you get some of the best views of the whole race. I think at least there's sometimes a waterfall. There won't be this year because our snowpack's terrible, but you get in this really fun alpine section and you pop out on the Antero Plateau, which is this broad kind of grassy slope that you see a lot of photos from us posting there because that's usually where Jordan is taking some pictures from. At the very top of that, you reach the high point and there's this little skyline comm station. And that's just for the metering. It's not actually an aid station. They're just pulling your bib as a backup in case we lose another aid station. So you can kind of ignore this. It's not super important. The main thing to take home from this part is this is the start of the switchbacks. And these are huge. I mean, I'll just show you on satellite. It's an old old mining road. And they're these massive, massive switchbacks. And it's just really, really cool. And the aid station is right down here. So as soon as you hit tree line, you're basically at the aid station. Antero is a decent aid station. It has some hot foods, but it's definitely minimal because it takes them about 2 hours of rocky 4-wheel drive trail to get up to. It's one of the hardest, if not the hardest aid stations for us to get vehicles into. So this descent, as you go lower and lower, gets worse and worse. So the upper section's ironically better. Once you hit tree line, it starts to get into this real cobbly stuff. And as it goes down, it just gets more cobbly and more rutted and more dusty and hotter. So just know that as you start this descent, don't bomb it too hard. This is where a lot of people's quads go to die. So there's no sense in being a hero at mile 18. Just take a chill, run down. There's a few water crossings on this section that you can stay cool with. So it's definitely worth dousing as you go. But this descent goes on for a while. It's the longest contiguous descent in the race. It's also the longest continuous ascent in the race. So again, don't overcook this. At the bottom, you'll hit the same road that you started on. So if you see this blue line right here and follow it back, this is the first turn you did to get off the pavement. By the time you come back to it, it's gravel again. And there's a sheriff's officer that we have posted up here just to slow cars down. So you'll see some flashing lights. That's a good sign. Here's the thing, though. You got to go right and then turn left. Okay. So just make sure you make the dog leg. We've got another comm station there. It's called Baldwin Gulch. That's the station that we use to determine when crews can leave for Cottonwood. So that's why it's there. It's not an aid station. It's just a checkpoint for crews. Once you get onto this road here, you go through this little cute town side of Alpine. You go around this really pretty lake. And then this stretch here, it's a climb. It's douche grade. It just goes up very subtly for, I think it's 3 or 4 miles, kind of winds along. It's nice because all of the traffic's on this road here. And so this is a lot less dusty. So there's not as many cars on it. It's a little bouncier for cars. So there'll be some, but not many. But it's hot. This is really hot. And if it's like it's been the past couple of years, this is where a lot of people start to feel the heat and the altitude kind of hitting them 1-2 punch style. So just kind of cruise through this as well as you can, keep shit together. And then you hit this little ghost town of St. Elmo. It's not really a ghost town. It's full of tourists. You can't have anybody come here. So there's no cruise here, but it's a very popular 4-wheel drive spot for folks to come. So there will be a lot of people in this, but they're not race related. You go through the main street. It's this really small section of old historic sites. And then you do this little turn and you go up here. There's a porta potty that we drop right here. And the reason for that is this road right here is just super nasty. It's really hard to get up. So as soon as you get up on this road, you turn right and you pop into the St. Elmo aid station. And this is the start of the out and back over Laws Pass. We have a marshal that's posted up right here to help make sure you make your turns the right way as you go in and out of this area. But just make sure that you don't accidentally miss it if for some reason something's happened. Once you get into St. Elmo, it's a fantastic aid station. It's always hopping because you've got hundreds of people in and out of that thing in any given hour. This is also one of my favorite sections of the course. I know a lot of people look at it and think, oh, it's an out and back. That sucks. It's so good. You get to do it twice. That's how fun this thing is. The first part of it's a really steep, sandy climb. Then you get into this gorgeous meadow and you run surprisingly runnable terrain until you get towards this climb and you do this relatively concise punch up to the top of Laws Pass. This is where we've got some photographers and the live stream stuff that's going on up here. It's a really fun spot. And the views from this looking out to the north, so towards Cottonwood, are just astounding. This is a really fun descent down into Cottonwood. It is steeper and looser on the Cottonwood side. It's a little bit smoother and more buffed out and slightly longer on the St. Elmo side. So your descent down into Cottonwood is another spot you can kind of overcook it. So don't hammer it unless you feel really, really good and you're used to that. Once you get into Cottonwood, this is your first crew accessible aid station. This is the 50K, 30-mile mark. And at this point, you've done about 7,500 feet of gain. So you get crew access here. This crew access is metered. And you do have to make sure that your crews have the parking pass. We'll cover this later. We also do a crew specific version of this event. And we do a pre-race reading just for crews. So don't stress the crew part just yet. But as a runner, Cottonwood's fantastic. You turn around and you go right back up what you just came down. It's hard to say that this isn't going to cook you. It's just the time of day, the amount of vert, the steepness, the altitude. This can hurt. But don't stress too much. Once you get over it, you got this really fun descent back into St. Elmo. You can kind of pick some juice back up. St. Elmo is a really great aid station. We load that place up with ice. So if it's hot, you get a ton of opportunities to cool yourself down because there's water all over this area. And then as you leave St. Elmo, you've got another douche grade section of Forest Road up into the Tin Cup aid station. This is just over 3 miles. It's like a 5K essentially. And it's like 600, 700 feet of vert. So it's just douchey. The downside with this section is if you're in the front of the race, it's hot and dusty. And if you're at the back of the race, it's hot and dusty. And there's always vehicles ripping up and down this. So it's just one of those sections you got to tolerate. The good news is as soon as you hit Tin Cup, you're on single track on the Continental Divide Trail for tons and tons of miles. And it's just spectacular. So once you hit Tin Cup, it's an awesome aid station. You have a very gentle climb out of this Chalk Creek, one of the forks of Chalk Creek, up into this alpine section. You can see here where the green turns to white. This all denotes alpine terrain. So you can see that you're just up above tree line here for some really, really extended periods of time. And this is it, man. This is some of the prettiest sections you'll have on the course. It feels so goddamn remote. It is remote. You're farther away from anything here than you are at any other point in the race. So it's really a track. There, we call it Alpine Tunnel because there's an old tunnel right here that they bored through back in the 1880s maybe. It got closed down very quickly because it was just not tenable to use. But this east portal is the east side of the tunnel. On the west side, there's a really cool ghost town. So if you're out here doing a scouting run, highly recommend doing this little detour down in here and checking it out. During the race, though, you're going to stay on the east side of the Continental Divide, and you're going to drop down and pick up the old railroad grade, which is right here. So this descent is single track, and then you hit here, and it's the railroad grade. And you follow that railroad grade all the way in to Hancock. And Hancock is Carnage City. It's fantastic. It's the halfway point. It's just below tree line. It's at like 11,000 feet. It's such a fun aid station, but it's brutal. If you look at the data, this is the longest time people spend in any aid station is Hancock. So plan for a lot of troubleshooting, problem solving here. This is where you're going to be able to pick up a pacer for the first time if you're running with a pacer. This is where a lot of times the weather starts to turn bad. It's just in this basin that holds it. So a lot of things can be happening here. All you got to do is just get to it and get back out of it. So you turn around and you're on this Forest Service road. This is a lot like the descent down Antero. It's cobbly, it's loose. The good news is there's very little traffic on it. So it's usually most people are coming through here in the evening or nighttime. So it's not super hot. There's not a lot of traffic, if any, on it. It's a good section just to kind of like process what you ate at the aid station, get your legs back used to moving. And then you hit the lake. And this is where you pick the single track back up. And this is a really, really fun section here. You go around the lake and then you climb up Chalk Creek Pass. And this is not a big climb. It's less than 500 feet, but it'll feel bigger, especially if it's at the night or if you're in the nighttime. But it's really, really pretty. If you are sort of mid-pack or faster, getting up here in daylight is a great goal, just visually. That's just a great target to have. If you're kind of mid-pack and back, you're not going to see this in the daylight, so don't stress about it. You'll have to check it out some other time or come out for a scouting run. The descent off of this is kind of, it's degrees of nasty, and then it gets better and better and better as you get closer to the hut. So this first section here, there's sometimes snowfields. It's usually sloppy and wet. There's willows. It's just kind of an adventure. You get down to this little beaver pond area and the trail stays wet, but it gets like pretty buffed out. The pitch also drops out. It's almost soft. If you ever run a Pacific Northwest and you know, like the spongy feel the ground can have, like this section is kind of that way. So it's a nice spot. You're going to just keep cruising downhill until you get to Lost Wonder Hut. And there's a couple of really large scree fields here that you can use as a kind of a guide to know when you're there. So if you look at this, this is a super huge, you cannot miss this. This is a huge talus field that's just come down from Mount Etna above it. And as soon as you cross it and you hit the road, you start this third of a mile out and back to the actual aid station. You'll cross a few smaller ones. You can see like this one right here, but they aren't it. You'll know when you hit this. It's huge. It's like 300 or 400 yards wide and goes up forever. So it's really cool. There is a marshal at this junction right here. They'll push you back uphill. You get to the aid station. This is the only indoor aid station we have. It's this gorgeous backcountry hut that we rent from some locals. This is another place where people tend to spend more time than they probably should. It's somewhat understandable because we do backcountry pizzas there. So we're literally cook. They have gas. So we literally cook pizzas and turn them out. And there's fire stove or wood stoves going and it's warm and cozy. So easy place to get sucked into. Try not to. You got, it's uphill from this part here. So as you leave, it's a good time to eat and walk because it's kind of a nice downhill. So you can jog or walk down and chew. You're on this road. I'm going to switch back here to the map. So you're on this 4-wheel drive road for just under a mile until you reach this trailhead and you switch back to single track. So this turn is marked really, really well. It used to get vandalized in the first couple of years. We haven't had issues with it in the last 5. but it's a good idea to make sure you know where this turn is, because you want to make sure you get onto the single track. This is all still, by the way, part of the Continental Divide Trail. From here, you have a very punchy climb up to Boss Lake. This is another spot that in the nighttime, sometimes people get turned around on. We mark it really, really well. In this section alone, we have 30 flags in less than half a mile. So there's really no excuse for getting turned around, but just people tend to be kind of zonked by then. Good place to use the map if you have it uploaded. You're going to go around the lake, and then you pick up a very steady climb all the way around these Hunt Lake, and you keep going up until you hit this basin and the head wall. And the head wall is really cool. As you're climbing up this, you can see lights way up above you, and they look like stars. And you're like, oh my God, that's like thousands and thousands of feet above me. And in reality, it's not. It's like 700 to 800 feet, but it's just super imposing. This basin is the prettiest basin on the whole course, in my estimation, but only the top 4 or 5 runners get to see it in the daylight. So the vast majority of us mere mortals are going to see this in the dark. Punch up through the head wall, and you hit the ridge. And this is a very long section of perfect alpine single track that you run all the way into Purgatory. And Purgatory is in the Monarch ski area. So this is a really, really fun section. You can see how long you're up here above tree line. And at the very end, you start to drop back into tree line before you hit the aid station. This section is predominantly downhill, but it does undulate. The climbs feel really brutal because you're above tree line, but they're like 100 to 200 feet. So they're super chill. And most of it's in that downhill. When you hit the ski resort, this was a thing last year. We had to move the aid station from where it's historically been because Monarch ski area is expanding their terrain, and we needed to move out of their way. So the aid station for Purgatory used to be up here where this little tent symbol was. Now it's about another mile closer to the Monarch aid station. So kind of sucks because you would like to have it sooner, and it's so close to Monarch by this point, it doesn't do you a lot of good. But Purgatory is a really, really great aid station. Don't get sucked into it. Get to Monarch. Just push through Purgatory. Use it, but get to Monarch. The section from to Monarch from Purgatory is a mix of cat tracks and single tracks. So this section here is on cat roads for the resort, and then here you pick up some nice single track and you cross the highway. We'll have marshals here. You do need to yield to vehicles here. They will not yield to you, and they speed. So be very careful. We have like 4 or 5 volunteers here at all times to get you across safely. As soon as you get in, this is the next spot that your crew can meet you from Hancock. So it's a massive parking lot. This whole area is a huge parking lot. There's a gift store that's operated here, but also by the ski area. The aid station is right next to, so this right here is the little gift store, and this is where the aid station is. You as crew will have people parking all in here, and then the overflow is back up here. But it's very common for runners to, meet their crew before they get to the aid station proper. We don't love that. We'd love to know you're here sooner, but it's just the way the locale works. So just make sure when you get to Monarch, you check in and you check out. If you've been crewed for 20 minutes, make sure technically we don't know you're there. So check into Monarch, check out when you leave. When you leave, you're on, there is some single track in here, but we aren't allowed to use it. So don't take it. You stay on this road. It's again, a forest road. And you basically stay on that for about a mile. And then you turn and you cross, there's kind of a 4-way junction, and you take what's called Satan's Slip and Slide. If this is wet, it's heinous. It's really, really slick. It's super steep. It hasn't been wet for most of the years, so it's not super bad. Once you get through these switchbacks here and you pick up this is some of the nicest downhill you get. It's really good grade. It's on either a power line service road or an actual forest road that's fairly well maintained. So it's a nice spot. The pro tip here is Monarch is above 11,000 feet, and you're going to have a really, really hard time eating. You're going to feel like death. It's terrible. Foos is below 10,000 feet. get to Fooses. You can eat so much better at Fooses. You'll feel so much better. You can breathe better. You can drink better. Everything's better at Fooses. So just get downhill as fast as you can. When you get to Monarch, you have about 3,000 feet of vert that you've climbed but haven't descended. When you've reached Fooses, you're net zero. So everything from Fooses to the finish line is, I think it's like 5,000 or 6,000 feet. So it's not a ton, but it's in a bunch of small, chunky sections. When you get to Fooses, you stay on a road, you cross the highway again. We also have marshals here. And then you hit the Hill of Broken Dreams, which is noted that way because everybody who just got feeling really, really good coming downhill hits this and reminds themselves that they're at mile 70 something and they still feel like death. It's not bad. It's actually really runnable if you've got good legs, but you hit the top of it and you start this series of rollers that just kind of go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down all the way until just before Chavano. And then there's a big descent down into the Chavano aid station. Chavano is a water drop that's 2 miles from Blanks. Blanks is the next crew accessible aid station from Monarch. So Chavano is really, really minimal. I think Tin Cup and Chavano are the 2 smallest aid stations we put on. So you're going to get some water, you get some gels, maybe some drink, but that's it. You're just going to push through. Don't stress about running short of water or anything here because you've got literally 2 miles to Blanks, and Blanks is massive. There's this really fun switchback, single open switchback that you climb up into here. And then it's fairly cruiser, very minimal vert from there until Blanks proper. One thing to note at Blanks is if you look at the single track actually goes straight and then you rejoin it up here. But to get to the aid station, you turn onto this Forest Service road, you hit the big aid station, and then you go back up this way through the other trailhead to get back on the CT. So last year, Alex Nichols missed this, and that's where he went from first into second place. It's very uncommon for it to get missed, but it's easy to get missed, especially if you're just heads down. So don't miss it. We sign really well there. All right, so you leave Blanks. Blanks to Raspberry is just under 10 miles. It is a really hard section. So brace up for it. It's not high. You're below tree line the entire way, but it's just up and down, up and down, up and down. And it can be really, really hot. If you're coming through here anytime around probably maybe like a 29, 30 hour finish plus, this is going to be very hot. There's less scenery because you're in the trees a lot. So there is shade, but it's still warm. So persevere. There are some water crossings here. You get some bridges. You can douse, try to stay cool. But you're just going to keep traversing up along the face of the mountains all the way back to Raspberry 2 now. And you'll pass this junction here, and you'll recognize that from where you started, but you're just going to go back to Raspberry. And then from here, you've done this before. So you're just reversing it. You're going up this cruiser single track, got a small climb, this punchy descent, and then some really cruiser paved road and forest road all the way to the hot springs. And then you've got Swear Hill, which is the last basically 400-foot climb to get to the finish line. And the reason it's called Swear Hill is because in the early years when we didn't have a lot of runners, I could hear people cursing as they were climbing up the hill at the start line. And that's how we knew people were coming in. So persevere, turn into the field, finish, and you're done. And the cutoff for the race is 37 hours. So we moved that up from 36 2-3 years ago now. So it's a 37-hour total cutoff. The cutoffs for individual aid stations are listed here. Pay close attention to them. One thing that I want to note that can catch people off guard is the cutoff at Monarch is 9 a.m., but you are technically about an hour and 20 minutes behind at 9 a.m. at Monarch. And what I mean by that is if you take 100 miles and you divide it by 37 hours, you should be at Monarch sooner based on that pace than a 9 a.m. cutoff. The reason we put the 9 a.m. cutoff is because the first 2/3 of the race is so much harder than the back third. Now, the back third is still really hard, but we just kind of give you a little bit extra grace to get through that harder stuff. But once you get to Monarch, you really got to reel back some time. So the easy place to do that is from there to Fooses. So just try to cruise into Fooses, and oftentimes you can get most of that mileage and time back, and you're on course for a comfortable 36-hour finish. However, if you're not, you will be chasing cutoffs pretty hard, and they are harder and harder to make as you get closer and closer to the finish line. So try not to get there at 9 a.m. All right, last things on the course, and then we'll do a quick Q&A on the course stuff specifically. On this map, or sorry, on this page, you've got the full course map, which is what I was just looking at. You've got the KML file, the GPX file, so you can upload this to your watches. Here's written turn-by-turn instructions if you like to print this out and physically have it. And then most importantly, there's this Avenza link. Avenza is a mapping service that we use that provides a free map that shows you in real time where you are on the course. So everything we just looked at is on this map. This map is free to download, and you turn your phone into airplane mode, and it will literally show you exactly where you are at all times in the course, which is really helpful, especially if you just want that extra insurance that you're not going to miss a turn. This is worth having. So make sure if you come out, you've got this, whether it's just for training runs or for the race day. And then the last thing is the elevation profile here is a little old. It doesn't show all of them. So for example, it doesn't show Chavano, but you can see Chavano is at the bottom of this little climb right here. So that's where they are, and that's about it. So, alrighty, questions. Go ahead and drop them into the chat or take yourself off mute and ask me what you got. Don't be shy.
Hey, Caleb, quick question for you.
Sure.
At the very beginning of all this, you mentioned 3 different sections that had 10-mile gaps in between aid stations. I know the first one is Raspberry to Antero, and then I also caught Blanks to Raspberry inbound. Was there a third that I missed?
Yeah, you didn't miss it. I didn't say it. It's Lost Wonder to Purgatory. That's also 10 miles.
Thank you.
Yep, good question.
Hey, Caleb, quick question. There were 2 sustained sections in the Alpine above tree line. How long are those 2 sections roughly?
Be hard to say tree line to tree line. I think the longest section is the ridge, and that's 4 miles. I think the section above Tin Cup to Hancock is maybe almost the same. It might be just a fuzz shorter. And then the Antero section's also fairly long. That's maybe 3.5 miles. And tree line for reference here is about it varies by aspect. It's anywhere from about 11.8 to 12.2.
Thank you.
Julia, we're going to cover drop bags at the end. Kate had the question too. All right, we'll just cover now. So if you go to the course page and scroll down, it lists which ones accept drop bags. The other area here to pay attention to is the type of aid station. So a full aid station means it serves hot foods. Now there are degrees of this. Antero serves less hot foods than Hancock serves, but that's also because of time of day. You don't want hot foods typically at 11 a.m. in the heat. You want hot foods at night. And so there's some variation to that. Same with the types of hot foods we're offering. So if you're coming into Blanks, you're going to get more breakfast options. If you're coming into Hancock, you're going to get more traditional dinner options. So you can use that to kind of gauge what you think you're going to want in terms of nutrition or other supplies for your personal race. Drop bags get dropped off at runner check-in. So that's Thursday at the high school in Buena Vista. I highly recommend using drop bags, especially at Cottonwood, because that's where you have to pick up the mandatory gear, the second chunk of the mandatory gear, which we'll cover here shortly. So the rule of thumb is if your crew misses you and you're fucked, you should have had a drop bag. So pack a drop bag if you're nervous. A lot of times what I like to do at the races I run is I still give the majority of the stuff to my crews because they're usually very solid and reliable, but I pack the essentials in a little drop bag. So that's typically nutrition, any socks, gear, anything else I want to change. So if you're going full solo, it's worth, being pretty thorough on the drop bags. If you've got a crew coming the whole way, I personally would try to cherry pick. If you don't need them at Cottonwood, don't make them go to Cottonwood. It's just hard. The shuttling there is challenging. So that's kind of the feedback. Don't make them huge. A while ago, there was this really unfortunate trend of people trying to use 5-gallon buckets for drop bags. That's a terrible decision. These literally get put into the back of volunteers' vehicles, and then they drive them to these places. So the more malleable, the more conscientious you are of size, the more helpful it is. The last thing I'll say, and this is all in the runner's guide, by the way, make sure your stuff's waterproof. It will rain on you at some point in the day, whether you're there or not. If your stuff gets wet and you show up, it's wet. So best waterproofing in the world is a Ziploc bag. And make sure your bags are very clearly labeled so the crews can find them quickly for you when you show up. That's kind of it. Ben, thanks for shouting out. In the runner's guide, we do list out the food menu. It doesn't list it specifically by aid station, but it does list all of the food types we have at all of the aid stations, including whether they're vegan, gluten-free, meat, or anything like that. One thing to pay attention in there, because that is last year's runner's guide, it is not yet updated for this year. I typically do this around May. That lets us get through, make sure we've cleared kind of any hurdles before we start writing. But we don't have Scratch coming back this year. So last year we had Scratch and Maurten, but this year it's just going to be Maurten. So that's the only known change I know on that menu. So heads up on that. Good questions, though. Let's keep going. Who else has something they want to talk about?
Yeah. Sorry if I missed this at the beginning. I'm just wondering if we're coming over to check out the course at all in the months leading up. If there are any areas that we should not check out beforehand because of private access or anything like that.
Yeah, good question. The whole course is on public land except the finish line. So the finish line is private. We lease it, but it is not open to the public. So if you come out here and you want to run that first section, don't go into the field. You'll see gates and private property signs, whatnot. But other than that, you can go anywhere on the course. So I wouldn't worry about that. The seasonal access is probably more. We'll cover that when we talk about snowpack. But in terms of kind of like timing when you come out and what you scout, chasing snow is kind of the name of the game. So we'll cover that towards the end. But good question, Jeff.
Thank
What else? Let's keep moving.
Caleb, I have a quick question just about laws passed and lightning. Have you ever had in years past had a problem with lightning? Maybe runners get stuck in Cottonwood or St. Elmo? Just kind of curious there.
Yeah, very good question. We do typically get storms at some point while people are over laws pass. They are sometimes electric. To my knowledge, and I feel relatively confident in this statement, no one has had a close call with being struck by lightning. And I don't think we've had much in the last couple years. If people tend to get stuck, it's usually right at tree line there, and there's just kind of a nasty pocket. And then, the weather clears and you pop back over. There's really not a big point to stopping in Cottonwood necessarily, at least not to me. So I would, sorry if my screen just glitched out on everybody. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. We're having a windstorm right now. We lost power for like 2 seconds. Let me get back to presenting. Yeah, so Kevin just dropped in the chat that he sat, below tree line waiting for a bit in the past. That's not uncommon, but it's also not common. So I wouldn't get too stressed about it. And the reason we have those a little more generous cutoffs for that section is because we want you to have a little bit more time to wait before you have to risk it for the biscuit. But don't risk it. Nothing's worth your life. All right. Any other questions?
If you were to have a pacer for one section, what would you recommend? Like from the 50 to 67?
I would say Hancock to Monarch is it's a long time. It's just slow, tedious. It's at night for most people. You know, if the weather's bad, it's bad. So that would be my personal vote. I think your personal style will dictate maybe a different answer. Some people like to have pacers on the lower stuff where they can really have somebody pushing and pulling them on the runnable, well, yeah, air quotes, runnable terrain. And some people like to have someone up higher where the navigation's harder or elevation is more risky for them. So, you know, for me, I would pick what you just said, Hancock to Monarch, but it is a little bit more personal than just that. Good question so far. What else do we have? All right, we're gonna go once. Going twice.
Hey, I had one more quick question.
Okay, what is it?
So you had mentioned, and this will just be a review, but you said that the cutoff time at Monarch is generous, but you should account for an hour and a half quicker if you're aiming for that 36-hour cutoff. Could you just kind of review that again really quickly?
Yeah, sorry. It's hard to say without kind of making things get muddy. So if you take 100 miles and you divide it by 37 hours, and then you say, okay, at Monarch, which is 67 miles, you know, based on that hourly pace, when should I be at Monarch? It would want you at Monarch about an hour and some change earlier than 9 a.m. And that's just moving at a completely linear pace, right? With no variations. You're doing that 14.75 minute mile kind of thing. So the reason that we prorate that cutoff, if you will, is because to get to Monarch is slower than we think it is to get, and it's harder to cover that ground than it is to go from Monarch to the finish. And so we sort of steal from the back end of the race to give you a better chance of getting through Monarch and catching back up, if you will. So especially if you recall what I said about how at Monarch, you've got about 3,000 vert in the bank, but by the time you get back down to Fooses, you're at net zero again. So you don't have any vert in the bank. So if it's easier to look at Fooses as sort of the litmus test for how you're pacing. If you can get to Fooses before cutoff, you're going to be pretty good. If you're like right at cutoff, it's pretty challenging. But if you've got 15 to 30 minutes to spare and you don't fuck anything up, like, yeah, you'll get in. It'll just, you know, be a little spicier than you probably wanted. That any more clear? Or is it still clear as mud?
No, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Cool. Julia, don't worry about the toad bath. It's in the runner's guide. You can review that there. There is not spot tracking, to Kate's question. The live tracking that we do offer is pretty much in real time, but it's at aid stations. So if you want something midstream, so between aid stations, using an InRange or a spot device that your crew or loved ones can access will give you more accurate, information than what we can provide through the race. That said, I don't know if it's super useful. I used it with Kelsey when she ran 2 years ago. If there's weather, if there's a lot of people using it, it just sometimes isn't even accurate. So hit or miss. From a safety perspective of having the SOS button, that's clutch. Highly recommend just from that angle alone. But nowadays, the newer iPhones, newer Androids have an SOS feature. So InReaches or spots are sort of a little less necessary. But safer is always better, in my opinion. Good questions. Last calls. Then we're going to talk about gear.
Course marking, I don't know if you went over this already and I missed it or if it's in the runner's guide. Do you sign turns? Are they typically just marked with ribbons?
We don't sign them. I actually have some markings. Let me show you. So we don't sign sign junctions because they're incredibly vandalized. If we put signs up, people will literally just flip the signs or rotate them and really screw people up. So we use these flags here. Somebody made them very clipped together. Okay. They are pink ribbon that says Freestone Endurance on it. And then it has this little yellow dangly bit that's reflective paracord. With a headlamp on, that yellow really pops. It's bright. So if you're using a waist belt, though, it doesn't reflect as well. But we have these on every marking, whether it's daytime or nighttime sections. So going into turns, we always mark around chest height on the right side every basically to a fifth of a mile. At turns, we'll mark on the side of the turn. We'll do 3 in, 3 out. So if you're coming up on a right-hand turn, you'll see 3 flags in relatively quick succession. You turn to the right, you'll see 3 flags going out, and then you'll go back to that, roughly quarter of a mile confidence marker interval for that. So the one thing to note is we do have a few signs in a few places. They're usually wrong way signs. And then lastly, we have at most aid stations a 1 mile to aid station sign that gets put out. And that's a little, I think it's like, 8x10 kind of corrugated plastic signs that you can use. They also have little reflectors on them, but it's a nice little boost to see that you're a mile away from an aid station. So that's about all you'll see. In the Alpine, we use these little metal rods and we clip the flags to them. Otherwise, it's clipped to vegetation. So good question. Michael, yeah, the runner's guide gets issued in around May. There's no point in issuing it before then because we don't necessarily know from the Forest Service or snowpack or anything specific how this year might have different logistics. So May is usually mid to late May is when that thing pops out. The current guide is short of changing the scratch stuff and switching or adding, I should say, the metering to Hancock. Virtually everything in the 2024 guide will be consistent with the 2025 guide. So it's good if you want to prepare a little sooner, you can use that with pretty good confidence. Okay, last calls. I'm going to talk gear. All right, gear. So if you go to the website again and you go up to runners and click required gear, this is your gear list. This applies to any person at any point who is running with you or you, sorry. So if your pacers don't have this, they don't pace you. If you don't have this, you don't run. You have to have this locked down. There are 2 types of gear. There's the base gear, and that is required from literally the entire race. You have to have it from the start. You have to have it at the finish. Then there's the divide gear, which is gear that we want you to have during the severe weather window and nighttime period on the Continental Divide, because that's the riskiest place that you're going to be for a while. So we're going to start with the base gear. That's what you're carrying at the start. This gets checked at the start before you actually start. So you show up from 5 to 5:45. You do your gear check. You check in with us, and then you wait in the queue. So it is, in my estimation, impossible to run this race without a vest. Although I don't know if anybody's tried. Be funny if they did. A standard vest works great. I like the Osprey Duro 6. It's super cozy, carries just amount of weight. It's got good bottles and good pockets. So that's what I typically use. You can use whatever you want. You don't need a big pack though. If you have good gear, you can kind of run pretty light. But you got your pack, and then you have to have an emergency whistle. A lot of times the vests have those integrated into clasps or buckles. Sometimes the bivvies, which is the next thing you have to carry, will have it, on the actual clasp on this, will have an emergency whistle. Just make sure you have the whistle. Then you've got this emergency bivvy. This is the sole brand. It's what you find in most high-end outdoor retailers like REI or your local shops. It does not have to be this brand, but it must be this style. And what makes this style is that this is Mylar, like your traditional space blankets. However, it has a nylon coating that prevents it from tearing. And this is actually a bag. It's not a blanket. It's a sleeping bag style bivvy bag. So make sure that you've got this. You can get these knockoffs on Amazon for I don't know, $3-4. You can buy this for $7 or $8. Doesn't matter. You just have to have this bivy. This is on you start to finish. You never get to drop this. You also have to have a minimum of 1.5 liters of water capacity. That does not mean you're physically carrying 1.5 liters of water at all time. It simply means that you have enough in a bladder or a bottle to carry that amount of water. The single greatest tip I can give you in all of today is carry the little filters that go into your soft flask bottles. There is a lot of water on this course. It is usually quite cold and refreshing, and you can save a lot of weight by having that filter and using it to supplement you between aid stations. The downside is you've got to be aware of where the reliable water sources are. It's been on my to-do list for 4 years now to make a map that shows you just that, but I haven't made it happen. So use it at your own discretion. But if you're coming out here for a training run, pin those spots so that when you come back up here during race day, you can use that intel and save some weight. Next thing on the list is you have an emergency light source. That is predominantly a cell phone for most people, because most people are carrying their phones for music or navigation or photos. However, if you're going a little lighter, it has to be 10 lumens. Some of the newer watches have a flashlight mode. If it's more than 10 lumens, that will work. The easiest thing, in my opinion, is those little 75-cent LED keychain lights that you get from Amazon or a hardware store. And if you just tie that on with your whistle and your bivy, when you got to go check it at gear checks, you just whip it out and there it is. And you probably won't use this, because by the time you're actually in the dark, you'll have your preferred headlamp or waist belt or whatever you're using for lighting. So for this section, this is literally just a backup. The idea there is if your light dies, you have something to change batteries or signal for help. I'm gonna skip and then come back real quick. Collapsible cup. We are a cupless race, so you are on your own for carrying a cup. There are 2 schools of thought. I have very strong opinion about this. Your first school is this. This is the classic one that races started giving you for swag about 4 or 5 years ago. They suck. They work great for Coke, but you can't set them down and they don't hold hot food and you can't put bigger food in them. So you can use this. It's super light, but what you want is this. It's an accordion cup. This is a Sea to Summit. GSI also makes one. The reason I like this is you can physically set it and it doesn't fall down. It's insulated, so you can use hot food. And when you want to leave, you can load this up with whatever you are eating, whether that's like pierogies or goldfish. You can put it in here and walk with it. So it's super, super handy for this. I do really like the Sea to Summit ones the best. They are a Boulder brand here in Colorado, so I quite favor that. However, you can get knockoffs like this one from Amazon, but you'll notice it was really easy for me to depress this. So it's softer silicone, so it doesn't hold up as well when you're setting it down. It can tip over easier. So the Sea to Summit is, in my opinion, like the best for using it. They have 3 different sizes, small, medium, large. Basically, the large one I switch over to at nighttime because it holds soups really well. I like soups, so you can use that. I don't remember what they cost. I honestly have so many of these now. I just put them out at aid stations for runners that lose theirs.
$14.
$14. I think when I started this, they were $7. So thanks, inflation. But this is what you want. This cup, specifically this cup. Highly recommend it. All right. Now the most important piece of gear you carry during the whole race, and that is your waterproof jacket. And I must stress that this is a waterproof jacket. It cannot be a water resistant jacket. It can't be a Houdini. It's got to have what are called taped seams. And I will demonstrate for you what that looks like. So if you look at this jacket and right here, see that band of tape, that's what water seals the stitching on the outside. If your jacket does not have tape seams, it is not a waterproof jacket. It's that simple. So you have to have a waterproof jacket at all times with you. I will often call it a shell. That's just what we call it. This is, I think, was a $200 jacket, and it rolls up to that. It's quite small. It's quite light. It's always worked really, really well. They tear somewhat easier if you go this light. You can use a ski parka for all I care, but I don't think any runner hasn't put on a jacket at least once. If you're out there longer, you're probably going to put the jacket on more and more often. I will say having a really nice shell will give you a better experience. You'll have more room in your pack. you'll have a more breathable material. If it does actually nuke on you, you'll be more comfortable and better prepared for any emergencies that might come out of this. So highly recommend a good quality shell. You can get these things like Arc'teryx's Norvan is incredible, but it's like a $700 jacket now, which is insane. So a lot of brands started making kind of these ultralight ones. Any of those that are tape seams will probably do pretty well, but it's a good idea to not show up to race day with a jacket you've never worn. So highly recommend training with whatever you're using. Okay, that's your base gear. You have to carry this the whole time, every time. Then when you hit Cottonwood, you got to pick up your divide gear. Now, the past couple of years, it's been really hot at Cottonwood, and people get grumpy at me because they're carrying pants and they're sweating their ass off. I apologize. Some years it's super hot, and some years we have severe weather warnings and it's snowing. So you have to carry everything. The number one thing is pants. So I guess real quick to clarify, if you're wearing it, that counts as carrying it, right? So long as it's physically on you on the trail, that's counts. So if you're wearing pants, you don't have to also pack pants, that you have them with you. At nighttime, I like to switch the pants anyways, but if you're running a section that's hot and you just need an emergency pair of pants, carry the lightest thing you have. This is a little rain shell pant that I have that folds up about the size of my pack. You could use leggings if you wanted to use those, tights, something like that. They do have to be full length, so capris don't work. You can't use like a sock short combo. It's got to be continuous. That's really it. I would say up from Cottonwood to Hancock, carry the lightest thing you can. And then if you actually are looking at some colder weather, Hancock to Monarch is the section where like thermally you want to be a little bit more cautious. So you got your pants. Now you've got your secondary light source and your primary light source. All that really means is that you've got a headlamp or a waist belt you actually like using in addition to your emergency lamp that you've been starting with. I see a lot of people running from the start with headlamps. It doesn't make any sense. It's like 8 or 9 ounces of weight you don't need to be carrying. But by the time you get to Hancock, you are going to need a light for most people. The tail end, people chasing cutoffs, will need a headlamp from St. Elmo too. So caveat with that. Then you have a beanie or a buff. You all know what those look like. And then lastly, an extra layer, which is either, it has to be at least a long sleeve, but it can be more than that. So it could be a puffy, could be a fleece vest, something, or sorry, not a vest, but it just needs to be thermally. The single best thing you can possibly wear at the High Lonesome 100, and this is not a plug, we are not sponsored by Merino Wool brand, is Merino Wool. Because this stays fully thermally performative when it's wet. And synthetics don't. So if you have a long sleeve synthetic shirt, which does meet the requirement, and you get wet, you roll your ankle and you have to sit. There's a thunderstorm, you have to wait. You won't stay warm. Merino Wool will. So this is a lightweight, I think it's the lightest weight Smart Wool makes. It's a long sleeve. This is killer. In the last 2 years, most people could run the highest alpine sections at nighttime in the middle of the night with just this on. Like that's how comfortable temps were. So this is a really good layer to have. Highly recommend it. When I paced Kelsey 2 years ago, we were moving so slow I ran into puffy. And by run, I mean power hike. It was still dope, but it was nice to have the puffy. So just note that your speed will dictate what kind of layer you want. The minimum required is that long sleeve. So have something like that. Okay. Your base gear gets checked at the start line before you start. Your Cottonwood aid station point, you have to pick up your divide gear. There is a gear check there. So you won't leave the aid station without your gear. This is a good point to remind you that drop bags with all of your required gear are a great insurance plan against your crew not being able to get there on time. So recommend putting your your gear in a drop bag. Secondly, your gear gets checked again at Hancock before you leave. And your Pacer's gear will get checked to Hancock before they leave. There is a gear check station at each of these that is labeled, and you have to pull all of your gear out. So here's the tip. Don't pack your bag perfectly and then go to the gear check and rip it all out. You just waste time. So just go to the table and just dump your shit and then just be like, here it all is, and then pack it really nicely to run, because otherwise you're going to spend a bunch of time packing to unpack to then repack. So save a few minutes there. Hancock is the last official gear check. We will sometimes randomly gear check. Depends on if we have weather or if we have an idea people might not be carrying it. But when you get to Monarch, you get to drop all of your Divide gear. So you still carry your base gear, but all of your kind of like nighttime thermal gear, you get to dump. So you dump that at Monarch. From Monarch to the finish line, you're back to your base gear. So if you have a pacer picking you up at Hancock, they've got to have everything on this list. But if you have a pacer picking you up at Monarch, they don't need the Divide gear. All they need is that base gear. Okay. This is a drum I have to bang. So every email coming close to race day, we'll hammer on this. We'll hammer on this at the pre-race meetings, the crew meetings. But most of the time, the runners are super dialed. The crews and the pacers tend to be the pinch points. So it's your job as the runner to make sure your pacers show up with the shit they need. That's on you. It's no one else's problem. So if you ask someone to pace you and they show up, they don't have it, that's going to be your issue to solve. And you don't want to be solving that on race day. You want to be running. So make sure you're communicative, make sure you're supportive. Don't plan on buying any of this stuff in Salida or Buena Vista. I think last year there were 5 bibbies in the Arkansas River Valley. 3 were in Salida, 2 were in Buena Vista. So if one group doesn't have their stuff and show up, they won't be able to buy everything they need. So come prepared. And yeah, that's it. We're right on time, but real quick, any questions specific to the gear lists? Can't go in once, twice, thrice. Okay, awesome. Now we're gonna switch over and talk about nutrition, and we're gonna have Bill Dittman from Maurten. Bill's a 2023 high-low finisher. Has been at Maurten for several years, and Lauren, who is a head nutritionist at Maurten as well. So I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to stay presenting. But Bill and Lauren, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you guys in Maurten?
Hey everyone, thanks Caleb. We're really excited. This will be our 2nd year fueling the High Lonesome. So last year was great. This year will be even better. We'll be even more dialed in. And just to give you, I'll let Lauren kind of dive into Maurten and hydrogel technology, but just to kind of brief you on the products that you're going to see out on course, we will have our Maurten drink mix, gel, and solids at each full aid station. We will not have fuel at the start line. However, if you come to packet pickup, I will have a tent set up at packet pickup, and we'll make sure that we give you the drink mix, gel, solid, whatever you need to get that first 7.3 miles to the first aid station. So we'll fuel you the day before so that you can have it all in your pack when you arrive at the start line. As I mentioned, drink mix, gels, and solids. Our drink mix will be our drink mix 160. We will have that pre-mixed at each aid station, so you can just fill up. You don't need to worry about the powder water shaking it all up. We'll have that pre-mixed for you. We will also have caffeinated and non-caffeinated gels at our aid stations, and then we'll have 2 flavors of our solid, which is an oat and rice based bar. Again, we'll touch on that a little bit more. And then beyond that, we will also, I'll be there personally at Hancock Aid Station helping get you guys in and out. And then, yeah, I will pass it over to my colleague, Lauren. Take it away.
Great. Great to be here, Caleb. Thanks again for having us and giving us a little bit of time. I'm Maurten, sports dietitian for Maurten in the US. So just wanted to kind of briefly, intro what the products are that you will have on course, make sure you feel confident in what it's going to give you, and just give you a little bit of background about how it works.
Sorry, I loaded at the wrong spot in here. Apologies.
All good. And as we're getting the slides figured out, I'll just kind of intro Maurten as a company real quick. So essentially, Maurten's out here trying to solve athlete problems. And a lot of that comes down to being able to fuel for these extended efforts. So all the products you will see have been really the result of athletes requesting, certain or identifying certain problems and us using innovation to solve them. So you can go ahead and skip to the next slide if you don't mind, Caleb. Thank you. Perfect. Yep, you can stay there.
Okay.
You're all good. Perfect. So big picture, right? Nothing new here, but we know in sports science, carbohydrates are king. Carbohydrates are the fuel for the working muscles, and the more carbohydrates we can tolerate, generally, the better our endurance is going to be. So if you hop to the next slide, please. So, lots of research here showing that not only do you want to keep taking in carbohydrates during your activity, we want to make sure we're starting with enough carbohydrates in our muscles and in our liver, and then, being able to continue to top up those throughout. So if you go ahead and click to the next. What happens, unfortunately, though, is that, when we see these high numbers of carbohydrates that athletes, are told to take in, and they do that in more traditional senses of, let's say, a more traditional sports drink or, other types of sports nutrition, there's the GI symptoms that come with that. And that's because essentially our bodies aren't made to be taking in lots of calories while we're exercising. It's just not how our physiology is set up. And that those highly concentrated fluids can slosh around in our stomachs, and when the blood is all in your legs, you don't have a lot of blood in there to help digest. So really what Maurten tried to do is solve this greater issue of, well, we know athletes need 60 plus grams of carbohydrates per hour when they're exercising, but no one can really get those in and feel good doing it. So if you hop to the next, perfect. So really what we did here was take a technology from the pharmaceutical industry called hydrogel. I'm sure you've heard the word before if you're not already familiar. But essentially what hydrogel is a sponge-like 3D structure. So it's used in the pharmaceutical industry to carry drugs through a patient's stomach very quickly and safely. And so essentially what we did is, instead of put medicine in there, we put sports nutrition and carbohydrates in there. So what happens, we're looking at the sports nutrition, the drink mix of Maurten. It's going to be a liquid, but when it hits your stomach, it actually turns into a hydrogel. And what that hydrogel is a semi-solid gel. So you're not going to get that sloshing around. It's pH sensitive. So as soon as it hits that stomach acid, it's really kind of called a disappearing drink. The idea is that it's not only going to be digested quicker and get to your muscles quicker, but it's really going to minimize a lot of that, stomach side effects that athletes tend to get. So that's kind of the quick and dirty about hydrogel. If you go ahead to the next slide, this should be a video if it's going to work. We'll test
I'm sorry,
our
Lauren.
technology.
I was texting Bill. I couldn't get it to work before. There's something
It's
with
fine.
the media viewer platform. I apologize.
No worries. All good. All it was a video of the liquid turning into a gel, so you can imagine that. And that's just, again, what happens when it hits your stomach. So as Bill said, we're going to have the Drink Mix 160 on course. So there's also Drink Mix 320, which is 80 grams of carbohydrates per sachet. Which all these would go in 500 ml water bottles if you were just doing one sachet per bottle, right? So just kind of that ratio, but the 160 will be mixed for you. So really you're going to get about 40 grams of carbohydrates per about 16 ounces of fluid there. All of the products will be unflavored. Really that is to help reduce any taste fatigue, which eventually is still going to happen regardless, but we wanted to cut out anything that could really challenge an athlete to keep fueling, right? Because that's always going to be the goal. Keep getting calories in. Calories are currency. So 2 types of carbohydrates in that drink mix, and unflavored, smooth. Then we're going to have the gels as well. So these gels, the black wrapping will be non-caffeinated, the white will be caffeinated. So just so you can kind of get used to that as you're looking at it. And the nomenclature, the 100, the 160, those numbers that we say, that's going to be the amount of calories from carbohydrates. So if you're in your head thinking, all right, I want to get a certain number of calories in per hour, or however you're going to approach your sports nutrition, quick way to just look at that and say, all right, 100 calories from carbohydrates. Now, if we know that there's 4 calories per gram of carb, then that's going to be 25 grams of carb in our gel 100s and 40 grams of carb in our gel 160s. So again, as I'm throwing out these numbers, it's more just to get you familiar with it, so you kind of can mix and match to find your, kind of approach with your nutrition there. The gels will be a little bit more of a jelly-like structure, jelly texture, rather than the more typical maybe syrup that you may or may not have had in the past. Quick note on caffeine. It is, a performance enhancing supplement. It is something to use as a tool. And obviously cognitively, that's a huge benefit for focus and alertness in those, intentional times throughout. I just encourage you to kind of approach that with a plan of how and when you want to integrate caffeine. There's lots of science behind, how that's going to work, but there's a range of really the amount of caffeine that's going to be most beneficial for you depending on your body weight. And that's going to be about 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. If you want to do that math, really the biggest thing I can say is just spacing that out throughout to, really think about when you might need that extra little dose of energy. And the bars, so these are our solids. Bill had mentioned them. They are oat and rice based. So think of almost like a Rice Krispie treat. We have one that is just kind of a plain Rice Krispie flavor, and one that's going to be a cocoa powder flavor, so like a bit of a chocolate for a little bit of a taste bud reset for you. These are low in fat and low in fiber, and that's going to be something that you're always going to want to check in on, throughout your fueling strategy, because that does not require lots of energy for digestion, and it's going to digest quicker. So these are going to be 40 grams of carbohydrates each. Great to have, a chewable option here that you can really rely on. And pretty dense in those calories. It's about a little over 200 calories per bar. Okay, so quick, just, kind of review of, all right, we have these products. How do I put them into, a fueling plan? How do I train to make sure that I am, getting used to taking in these calories? Really, you can hop to the next slide. What we see in the research is that about probably 200 to 400 calories per hour is going to be, that's a wide range, but it is, usually where we see most people in the research fall. Now, what that's going to look like is making sure you're starting really well, carb loaded, saturated, and that is where sports nutrition can help in the day before. Maybe that's adding in a drink mix with your lunch the day before, adding in, a little bit extra sports nutrition the morning of to make sure you're really starting fully saturated of that glycogen, that carbohydrate store. Excuse me. During the race, you're obviously going to get a mix of different things, but we would recommend probably between 30 and 60 grams of pure carbohydrates per hour. Now, you can certainly add in, things that are going to have a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, a little bit of different flavors and textures, because that's going to be important. But from the carb side, take a look at, your plan and get your stomach used to getting in at least that 60 grams of carb per hour. So one of the big, challenges can be getting your stomach used to taking in all of these calories, especially for such a long time and such a long distance. And with the, altitude, the elevation, like there's all these factors that can change your appetite, your even wanting to eat, your stomach tolerance, all of that. So there's some things that we have seen in kind of the sports nutrition space of how do we get our stomach to get used to taking in more calories than maybe it wants to at that time. And that's called training the gut. And the best thing I can say is from the get-go, from training, get used to taking in these higher amounts of calories during your runs. Do it during, shorter, easy runs. Do it during longer, higher elevation runs. Make your body get used to it. Your gut is a muscle that you can train. It's going to take practice. And the other thing you can do is, maybe you're practicing by taking in a lot of fluid and then going for a run. That might be comfortable the first couple times you do it. You're eating something a little heavier than you're going for a run. You're stopping midway and, adding in extra gel than you're used to. All of this can build the stomach receptors for tolerating carbohydrates. So again, use this time to get your body and your physiology used to taking in those carbs. And just quick recap, right? We know we have to take in carbohydrates as the main fuel source. Hydrogel is going to allow you to do this a little smoothly and quickly, more quickly than you would with other types of foods. So you can work that into your nutrition plan. And of course, as always, fueling early and often, from the get-go, we want to take in calories before you feel like you need it. Even if you're feeling great, start strong on the fuel side. And that's really going to help you on the back end. And split it up every couple hours. Get in some real food, change your texture, change your type of fuel if you need to. That can really go a long way.
Yeah, that's an important point. Is Maurten, we're not here to tell you to run the whole race on gels and drink mixes. Utilize that real food. You're in super good hands with High Lonesome. I like Caleb said, I ran it in 23, and I think the good aid station food is possibly what got me going to the next aid station and the next aid station after that. So utilize the real food, and then Maurten is going to get you from aid station to aid station. It'll be an efficient way to carry carbohydrate dense products.
Awesome. Just again, remember to practice it in training and recognize, your individual approach. Everybody's going to have a different way to attack this. So track it, log it, learn from your body's responses, what works, what doesn't work. And then, you can start to put together a greater plan, but practice and planning, not only the nutrition, but it's something you can control, right? So it's like, what can we focus on to really make you feel confident and well fueled going into the race.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren, for that. Before we jump into questions real quick for Bill and Lauren while we have them on the phone, one of the nicest things about working with them and their technology in particular is how well it works at high elevation. It's really hard to eat food at elevation, and it's really hard to eat food when you're at elevation for a long time. That section from Tin Cup to Monarch, you rarely go below tree line for very long before you're back up above tree line again. And so having something that you can eat or drink when your body is revolting on a consistent level is the difference between you slogging out or walking strongly, or even better yet, like running well through that section. And the amount of time that you can lose in a bonk is insane. And so it's really nice to have a couple of different options that can hit you at different points, but especially the gels at high elevation, just with how they worked last year and the feedback we got from those runners, my own personal experience and the team's experience, like it's good stuff. So it's worth practicing though, because if you show up to race day and try to use something brand new, that's just a recipe for disaster. So definitely go to your local running store, pick up a box or a bag of whatever looks like you're going to like it the most, and give it a spin and see how it works. I think you'll find that you'll recover a lot faster too in your training runs if you do a little bit of fueling, even on those shorter runs where you're not out there for 5, 6, 7 hours. So, okay, enough for me. Questions for Lauren and Bill while we've got them here. Don't be shy. Go ahead and take yourself off mute or drop it in the chat.
Hey, Lauren, thanks for walking through that. So the recommendation is the 30 to 60. Is the upper limit and even beyond that just what you can tolerate? I mean, if I can tolerate 90, no concerns, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
100%. And more like generally speaking, if you can tolerate more is probably going to be better, up to around that 90. So absolutely. I tend to, go a little bit on the lower end just to make sure people don't jump to the 90 and skip from 30 to 90. But yes, 100%, go for it.
I saw on a podcast, Gustav takes in like 160 in his Ironman or something, just insane levels of carbohydrates.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. The human body is pretty amazing. But would not recommend going to
No.
160.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a two-part question. So the first one, is there any difference in how the gut processes the gel versus the drink mix, or does it all just kind of turn into the same? And then second, does bicarb have any place in longer races, or is that primarily for like 4 or 5 hour events?
Great questions. As for the gel and drink mix, I generally try to explain it as the drink mix is going to be the gel in your body, just like you're looking at the gel. So drink mix is just made inside the body and the gel is made outside the body. So same idea. Obviously you're not getting as much liquid. So thinking about your hydration, like plan alongside if you're just doing gels or, kind of how you're approaching that, but your body will digest it with the same speed as the drink mix and the gels. So hopefully that answers that question. And as for the bicarb, that's a great question. Honestly, I'm going to just stick with the science and say, like, to be honest, we don't know all of, the capabilities in these longer ultra endurance efforts. I do think there is some promising research showing it acts on pain receptors, and it helps keep that muscle acidity pretty low throughout, and given how long it can stay in your bloodstream, certainly can be useful, especially for the elevation and climbs that you have. That being said, like, I can't pull up a paper and show you this specific kind of distance and everything else, so I will caveat that, but we do have lots of anecdotal research from our ultra community that we are having kind of better muscle acidity control, as well as kind of on the downhill specifically feeling like they're not getting as beat up. So take that as you will. Bill, do you have anything to add to that?
No, there's a lot of talk of bicarb being used in ultra. We know it's happening. We work with athletes who are utilizing it as part of their strategies. But as Lauren said, we always stick to what the science is telling us. And at this point, we're just not quite there yet.
All right, folks. Good questions so far. Last call for questions for Bill and Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren, I have a quick question. Is the 160 versus the 320 drink mix, is that just a packaging consideration? Are two 160s equivalent to a 320, or is there a compositional difference?
You're muted there, Lauren. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. It's going to be the same ratio of types of carbohydrates in it. So technically speaking, yes, it's going to, like, 2 packets would give you the same amount and the same, type of carbohydrate delivery. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, we can say, like, thinking about that in the same, if you're training with the 160, the 320, et cetera, it's going to be received the same in your stomach.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
And all drink mix on course will be non-caffeinated, just to throw that one in there.
one other quick note too is we tend to space. Are we still doing 160s at some of the bigger gap aid stations this year, Bill, like we did last year
Are
for
you
the
stopping
gels?
here? For the gels, yeah, we'll have this year. We're gonna make sure that we have the gel 160, the gel 100, and the gel 100 calf as well. Yeah,
Cool. All right, last call for questions before we go on to the next topic. Okay, awesome. Bill, Lauren, thank you so much for supporting the race and coming out tonight to tell us a little bit about stuff. Appreciate you guys' time. Looking forward to seeing you guys in well, not, I guess probably not Lauren, but we'll see Bill in person at Hancock. So look
That's right.
forward to it.
Thanks, Caleb.
All right, bye guys. Okay, next up, we have a little Q&A with some of our veteran high-low runners. One of them, Kevin Kennedy, just asked a question about Maurten, so he's on here. Kevin's started every year, had his first DNF last year, sadly. State's high-low double was tough, and then trail work made it harder. We got Silke Coaster, our single most number of finishes for any lady in high-low. She just got her 5th finish last year. And then Suzanne Eller, who went, I think, 2 and is running again, right, Suzanne?
Yes. That's
Awesome.
right.
Hell yeah. Okay, awesome. So the purpose of this section is for me to not talk and for you guys to ask actual runners who have done the course multiple times questions that they can best answer. So we're going to try to spend about 15, 20 minutes on this, and then we'll wrap up with a few kind of just like smaller punch list stuff. So like I said, we got Suzanne, Silke, Kevin. Kevin has flatland experience for what that's worth. Suzanne and Silke are both here in Boulder. But if you have questions, take yourself off mute, ask us, drop it in the chat, whatever you want. And if you want to aim it at a specific person, just make sure you say that when you ask the question.
I have a question for Kevin. I'm in California and I'm at like 0 elevation. What was your best like tips for preparing for the high elevation, and like how many miles did you run before doing this 100-miler for training?
Yeah, so the last time I was training basically at sea level would have been 2019, and I had the distinct advantage of having access to an altitude machine, and I made use of it as much as possible. I had also done that multiple years prior, and it always worked for me. So if you can get access to it, an altitude machine, do it. I know most people can't, so I would say your best substitute is being is extremely heat acclimated and as fit as you can be. Because honestly, in my estimation, fitness trumps everything. So in terms of mileage, during those years, I had actually doubled with another 100-miler about 8 weeks prior, and it was a relatively flat 100 with lots of running. So my biggest concern, and I think it was validated in retrospect, was it wasn't the climbing that was concerning to me coming from sea level, it was the descending. So try to beat your legs up as much as possible, whether that's running on roads, long descending routes where you're carrying a heavy pack, because to me, that's where it was almost like you couldn't recover from that. You can recover if you're struggling going uphill. You just got to eat more. You're not going to wreck yourself going uphill. It's always on the downhills. And then in terms of altitude, if you're not able to prepare your stomach in training, I would suggest being prepared to do as much liquid and gel at the higher elevations as you can, and eating solid foods, but food's tending more towards like, mashed potatoes or that kind of thing at the lower elevation. So you get something in your stomach, but you're not eating a burger or something. Because training your gut is a thing, and training your gut at altitude is a thing. And if you don't have access to it, you got to try to find a way to short circuit that and go around it. So I know, Silke, I'm sure knows this as well, but like John Davis, who's a 7th-time finisher here, he lives in Boulder vicinity, but he swears by Coke at altitude and nothing else. And he has access to training in the Alpine and all that, but he still says, not going to do it. Coke works, eat low, drink calories high. So hopefully that's what you're looking for. It's hard to do from sea level, but honestly, I think my second fastest time I was not living at altitude. So it's doable. You just got to pick your spots, I guess. Get as fit as you can and get heat acclimated. Like Caleb said, the last couple of years have been hot. 75, 80 degrees at 11 or 12K feels like the surface of the sun. So try to get as heat acclimated as possible. It'll help. It'll also help your digestion.
And if you can get out any margin of time ahead of time to acclimate, that's going to help you out too. So if you have the ability to work remote or extra PTO you're looking to burn, coming out, spending some time at altitude is a huge, huge advantage.
Yeah, I did that for 3 weeks in 2019. If you need camping spots, let me know.
How big of a difference was it? So I'm planning to go out like maybe 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time and just spend time at 8,000 and move up to like 9, maybe at 10,000 for a week. Like how big of a difference will that make? Maybe based on your past, doing that versus not doing that.
Do you want me to take it, Caleb, or you want to go?
You take Kevin because you got that flatland background, but Suzanne and Silke maybe chime in on that too, since you guys live at around, what's Boulder, 5,800 feet or something like that. So, but yeah, Kevin, take us off first.
So I can refer back to 2019 because I was living at 1,200 feet. I came out on July 5th or 6th, the day before the Silver Rush 50 in Leadville, ran a 50 miler and then camped for 3 weeks at about 10K. And I would say the altitude didn't affect me any more than it probably would anyone else that was acclimated. So I think you can do it in that time frame. And I want to say I hit maybe like 314ers, just sort of hiking around, but then sleeping at 10K almost every night. If you look at the altitude chart for the race, I mean, this is an interesting race because it's not Hard Rock and it's not Leadville, but it's both of them. Meaning, other than a little dip around the Alpine Lake at about mile 20, you're at 10K or above for 60 miles straight between mile 10 and 70. But you don't go to 14K like you do in Hard Rock, but you also don't go to 6,700 feet like you do in Hard Rock. The lowest point of the course, I think, is like the corner at the hot springs, like a mile from the start or finish. That is literally the lowest point of the whole course. So, like I was mentioning earlier, in terms of like how do you train for this thing, I think the higher you can get, the better. But also, there's a limit to that in that I would say if your choice is to like be up high or get fit, I would say choose get fit. And I could defer to Suzanne and Silke if they want to dispute that, but that's my perspective is fitness trumps everything because the less time you spend at those altitudes, the better off you are. And the only way to get through that stuff faster is to be more fit.
I would. I'd agree with Kevin. So I live at about 6,000 feet. Historically, I would try it once the course was clear with snow, and maybe Caleb touched on that. I'm assuming kind of course conditions right now in the beginning of the meeting, but I would just go up on the weekends and spend time on the course because I'm getting that elevation. I certainly can't speak to coming from flatline or sea level, but I think if you are taking the time to come out, you're going to want to feel decent too, to spend the time on the trail. So I think, you know, if you're sleeping, if you're camping at 9,000 feet, and then you're getting out during the day for your workout and you're hitting that 10, 11,000 feet, you're gaining quite a bit of acclimation with that. I think the fitness piece is the most important piece. I agree that I would stress. And then learning what your stomach does eating at elevation is another important piece to that, because it definitely is different than eating at 8,000 feet, trying to eat at 11, 12,000 feet. What's Monarch? I volunteered at Monarch the years I don't run, and that's the piece that gets you. So I think important pieces, yes, get on the course, get on, see those higher sections. I think I'm kind of the back of the packer. So the first year I didn't see Hancock to Monarch during the day, or so just I think that section would be really helpful seeing during the day, so because you're at night, you just see these headlamps, you're just trudging along, and then so get on the trail, get to those higher elevations, but you want to feel well when you're out here. And I think if you continuously are at 10,000 feet and all you have is 3 days, you want to maximize the time that you have and practice eating. Your gut's going to respond better to solid foods at a lower elevation than it is at a higher elevation, is my piece, my thought.
So, okay, anything to add to that?
No, I think that was all good advice.
Concise.
I mean, I think my only advice is, like, if you can't get up high because of where you live or because of your, other real life things, don't stress about it. I love Kevin's advice that is like, focus on what you can do. And what you can do is just train. It's just put your shoes on and walk out your front door and start running. And if you do that, you'll be fine.
Good questions, good answers. What else do we have?
Caleb, do you guys or Kevin or anybody locally have suggestions on kind of like the mid to long run training loops to do on the course that, they're like 12 to 20 milers that are good weekend jaunts to see the course, but try to do it loop wise?
I mean, I have a couple I can toss out there.
Yeah, throw them out, Kevin. What you got?
Well, the easiest one from probably accessibility would be to drive and park at Raspberry and go up almost as high as you want. You can tag and tear if you want to, but just basically run up Little Browns, and you can choose to run back down Little Browns if you want, or you can run down Browns. There's an amazing waterfall on the Browns side, on the Browns Canyon.
This is a really good place to plug that. That's the Swatch Ascent 50K course that we do in September, but in reverse.
I didn't know that.
You had no idea because you've never run either.
Yeah. So that's
run
one.
them all.
That's one. You can park at Cottonwood and go up over Laws, doing the Poplar Gulch Trail. So bop over into St. Elmo and probably grab an ice cream sandwich in town and head back over. I think it's probably going to be maybe 13, 14 miles, something like that, with 5K of climbing, I would say.
That's my favorite. Like, if you have no time to do anything else, like the double on Laws is such an easy out. It's the only out and back on the race anyway. So doing it as a run, as an out and back, is perfect because it's literally how you'll run it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a doozy. For context, a lot of this is dictated by time too. So Little Browns melts out first, and then Laws tends to go next, and then the Connell Divide sometimes doesn't melt out. This year it's looking like it'll melt out a lot sooner, but typically it would melt out around July 4th. So if you think about it, like, you really only have about 1 week window to hit the CDT before you're starting your taper. So Little Browns and Laws tend to be kind of the easier ones with both training schedule, snow packs, and accessibility to hit.
Yeah. The one other I can think of, I mean, you can always try to get on the CT, with the lower elevations. It's harder to do a loop in that sense. But also from Raspberry, you could do either if you had running somebody in shuttle, you could go all the way over and down the Baldwin Gulch side and get a taste of that Jeep Road descent, and then just shuttle back from basically that turn that Caleb was mentioning at the Alpine Lake there. Or you can actually continue that loop, run the Jeep Road back around, and take the CT all the way back around to Raspberry. I think that'll be that's probably like a 22 miler, 25 miler maybe. But you would then get a taste of the climb up to the saddle, the descent down the Jeep Road, and the 4 or 5 miles of single track into Raspberry at the end.
Yeah, what Kevin's talking about is you start at Raspberry, you go up and over Antero down here, and then you run this road back until you can pick up the CT. There's a few ways to pick up the CT, but you can basically do this kind of like blue line here with this red loop here. So, okay, though, this is your moment to plug the Colorado Trail as the single greatest training run for high-low.
Yeah, I think, it's so easy to get fixated on the high points and like that Antero climb, and then all the amazing sections on the Continental Divide Trail. But I think it's really important to get to know the Colorado Trail. It's the low part. It's the last part that you'll be running. So it's nice to know, as you're hitting those, mile 80, 90, plus to the finish, to know what that's going to be like. On paper, it looks like the easiest part of the course, but I think it's the hardest. It's a lot of running. It's a lot of undulating trail, which, everybody knows that that's hard on your body at that point. So don't underestimate that part, and spend, if you have the chance to get out there and cover the course, that part, the snow melts out very early in the season. I think sections of it are already clear now. So it's good to do some out and backs there and really get to know that trail.
It's also really easy. It's not open yet, but if you have someone that can run a shuttle for you, you can drop a car, basically get dropped off at Monarch, run from Monarch to the hot springs. It's it's a little bit more than a 50K, but you get to see that whole back half of the race. And it's a great way to like nuke your quads a bit at the start. Suzanne, though, what's your go-to?
I agree with Silke. I was going to ask if it's open. You think on paper that it would be a lot easier than it is, but it's hot and it's a slog, but it is runnable. And I think, at least for me, knowing kind of what is ahead of me, some people do better with a little bit of unknown, but I think in this case, it's helpful to know. And it is pretty. It's a nice run. So I think that especially in the coming weeks, if it's starting to clear, and I think, Caleb, you're pretty good about sending updates with kind of what the snowpack looks like. And I think people, if you follow on like Facebook or something, they'll throw out updates too. So, and I think the Cottonwood back over to St. Elmo, for me in the past, that's been tough. I've felt pretty decent St. Elmo to Cottonwood, but the turnaround's been tough. So I think that section too, and also really beautiful, is a good section to run.
Kevin, you raised your hand. You got another thought?
Yeah, maybe you mentioned it while I was typing, but as the majority of the field won't get to see the visuals from being on the divide between like mile 60 and 67, park at Monarch and run backwards on the course. Run essentially as far as you want. You could run all the way to the hut if you wanted to, but then you get to turn around. You get to see the head wall in the daytime, which is, I think, a huge benefit because, like Caleb mentioned earlier, if you have not seen that before and you see it on race day and it's in the night, it's going to look like you have a 3K climb in front of you. And it's just not. It's just not. It's like 700 feet.
Yeah, it's like 750 feet, I think, from when you can see it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it
It's
looks like
two-
3,000.
Yeah. So see it in the daytime, like it'll look like nothing. You'll enjoy yourself. And then you get to run that. You'll get to run the ridgeline, which is amazing single track. And then, get yourself out of the ski resort, and then you can stop at the shop, have a Coke, ice cream sandwich, whatever else, drive back into town, get a shower. So you can make that. I mean, if you went from Monarch to Bald Mountain and turned around, that's probably like 14, 15 miles, but you can make that as long as you want.
Yeah. Okay, quick question in the chat. Anna asked, polls, no polls. Give 3 sentences or less. Kevin, Suzanne, Silke. Polls, yes or no, and if so, where?
I have poles and I use them the whole time for the most part. Downhill too. Is my I'm a heavy poles girl, so I think doing this race without poles would be, I'm sure people do it, but
Silke, what's your take on polls?
I've done it with polls. I've done without polls. I would say if you have friends who have polls and they're not going to be using them, see if you can borrow them and put extra polls in drop bags. And that way you have options and you can start off without them. And if you want to pick them up later, you can, if you can have like 2 or 3 sets of polls along the way. I've done that in the past.
it's a good idea.
Kevin.
I've only ever used poles when I was managing an injury, and that was for managing a descent on a bad knee. If you're good with poles and you like them, use them, but I don't think you have to use them here. For me, I don't like poles because I don't like things in my hands because it deters me from eating. So I just choose to not. It's all relative speaking, but to me, it's not steep enough where like you're not going up to Kroger's like in Hard Rock where you're like, needing to dig those things into the dirt to get up the hill. It's just, there's nothing that steep. But if you're comfortable with them and they make you faster generally, go for it.
Yeah, I would, to be clear, I've not actually run High Lonesome in a single push, so I'm the least educated here, but I've done thousands of miles on this course. Poles really shine to me on loose stuff, and Hilo doesn't really have a lot of loose stuff. And like Kevin said on Kroger's or going up at over Grand Swap at Hard Rock, or even some of the loose stuff you'll do on 14er, having poles can be double your pace at times. But the Hilo is technical if you're not an East Coast runner. And if you're an East Coast runner, you're going to be like, what the fuck is this? This is a highway. I can do this all day long and my eyes closed. But, we get people from California that come out and they'll grab me by the collar at the end of the race and be like, you said it wasn't technical, and it's all relative, like Kevin and Silke and Suzanne all said. But I will say the majority of people in high-low do use poles. Just the data alone, probably 3/4 or more are using poles at any given point. I think being strategic though, and like Silke said, if you can put them in drop bags, even better. But I will end this question on one single thing. If you start with poles in the chute, I will disown you. Okay. I hear poles on pavement clicking at the start line and I die. So don't, okay? Don't. Just you hold them. Collapse, please. There's somebody that almost died 2 years ago because they got stabbed in the throat with one. So anyways, good questions though. Sorry, Kate, I didn't mean to make you cry in Californian. All right, the chat's been going solid. Let's do 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll kind of wrap up the last few things on the to-do list for tonight. What else we got, folks? Aid stations, Maurten. The single biggest loss of time in the race is in aid stations. we'll show you that in a second, but the pace predictor stuff can actually show you the averages that people are spending in aid stations, and it's pretty eye opening. So we can touch on that, but all right, one of the ones I want to. Oh, sorry. Does someone else have a question? Go for it.
I was just gonna say, do not stop at Purgatory.
I love Purgatory. Don't
Just
leave
roll
it.
yourself out of the ski resort. Just go get out of there.
I feel the same way about Chavano, and I love both Purgatory and Chavano. I spend a lot of time at both of those, and every time people don't stop, I get butthurt, but then I'm proud of them too. Like, good for you. Get the fuck out of here. Quick question, because this has been something that's been coming up more and more often. So the weather data, the nationally approved weather data, says high-low has been not hotter the last couple of years, but the runner experience has been much hotter the last 2, maybe 3 years. Don't fake news me, Kevin. So Silke, Suzanne, Kevin, what do you do to mitigate feeling hot? Race day and in training.
I love those sun shirts, those hooded sun shirts that have become very popular. I know you have some branded High Lonesome ones that are really nice, Caleb. Those are really good. I in the past few years, I've run High Lonesome with arm sleeves that I get wet in various creek crossings. So that has been really helpful.
I think when there are so many creek crossings, so like Silke said, take advantage of that, dip your hat in, buff sleeves. I tend to freeze my flasks, so I gather up all the extra flasks from friends, have them in the freezer, and then at cruise spots, just switch those out. So when you have cold water too, you can, put it on the back of your neck or use it to cool down.
One thing that happened, I'm a big believer in dousing. It's free water on the course, so it's super easy to hit it. But one of the things that Kelsey, my wife and business owner and aid station director for High-Low, she ran it 2 years ago, and she was dousing all the time, but she got really bad chafing because of it, because her shirts are really heavy and it was like rubbing with the pack and whatnot. And so going back to that, like, train your gut idea, I wouldn't call this like a hot take, because it's not, but I like to beat my feet up in water, and I like to douse a lot on long training runs, just to simulate with a pack, having a wet shirt, having wet feet, dusty feet, and that kind of thing, and just try to troubleshoot stuff. If all of a sudden you realize a shoe that you're using now doesn't like it when your feet are wet, but the old shoe did, then now a month or two in advance. But yeah, I definitely think getting wet's a huge way to stay cool, but it can also create a few problems if you're not careful. Quick note though, we were talking about this in the chat, but the thing about High-Low that's hot is not temperature. It does not get temperature hot at High-Low. It's UV exposure and solar exposure at altitude. So you at tree line, your UV exposure adds about 10 to 12 degrees in like field temps. So if you're running and the temperature is actually 65, that's more like 75 to almost 80 degrees, just because you're getting microwaves being so much closer to the sun. Down on the CT, it will potentially get into the 80s, very low 80s. But what makes it hot is the fact that usually in those trees, there's no wind. And so you're sort of stale and sweaty and salty. But up high, wearing a sun hoodie, sunscreen, anything that can kind of just try to reflect some of those UV rays will make a big difference. There are people who come in to some of the aid stations at night, like Hancock, and I'm sure Suzanne's seen this at Monarch too, that are like, they're sunburnt and they're shivering because they've just been shredded by the sun, coming from some place at sea level or close to it, and then coming up at altitude and not having any sun protection will really cook you. So heat training is great, but you also got to protect yourself. So sun hoodies, Church of the Sun hoodie, big believer in it.
I've used a brimmed hat, like oh gosh, Outdoor Research had made it. It wasn't a huge brim, so it was like a thin running hat. I used that like the first day going up Antero the second year, and I think that helped. So that's something to think about too. Practice with it, but I thought it was helpful.
Yeah, I would say, like Kayla was saying earlier, like practice getting wet, but at minimum, anytime you cross water or you can hear it, get your hands and arms wet and get your face wet. If you additionally get your body wet, awesome, but at minimum, get your arms and your face wet because your body reacts to that. And I can't think of a time where if you saw water, you would ignore it. It's just take the 3 to 5 seconds to just get a little wet. It's worth it.
Yeah. It's nice to wash the salt off too. Like, you know, you can't get everywhere quickly, but you can rinse a lot of the abrasion off your skin pretty quick. Oh. Quick plug for every year, well, not every year, last 2 or 3 years now, we've done a collab with Rabbit hoodies, and we'll do a little branded high-low hoodie. It's got like the elevation profile on the forearm, so you can kind of see, you know, it's a little kitschy, but I like it. I really like the Rabbit hoodies. My one complaint is they're a little heavier material. So I fly fish a lot. There's a brand called Sims that makes these super lightweight ones. Don't buy the Patagonia ones, even though I love Patagonia normally. They had to recall a bunch of them because their UPF ratings were like 10 instead of 30 or 40 they were advertised. So I think they may have fixed it now, but they were using some proprietary fabric that was like recycled, and so everybody else was using one that didn't have that issue, but theirs specifically had it. So just make sure you're buying a reputable one because it's easy to lie on labels. But yeah, the Rabbit deflector, it's like the deflector 2.0 now. Is nice. It's got pockets in it, thumb holes. It's got a little slit for your watch too, so you can cover your hands and still see your watch, which is nice. Okay, good answers. Just scroll back up in the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so let's do this. We got time for one more audience question, and I'm going to ask one more strategic question, and then we're going to move on. So who wants the last audience slot? Either we're really good at this or you all are really shy. Okay, well, I'm going to ask mine then. Okay, so we covered heat. One of the things I think a lot of people, I get this in emails a lot, so this is why I'm asking the vets here. People see the gear list and they know the weather can be volatile because we cover that a lot in the runner's guide. But a lot of years, the weather's not bad at all. Some years it's fucking heinous. What do you think the most consistent form of weather that you get that's not heat is going to be, and how do you manage it? Whether it's a positive or a negative.
I think both years I ran into a pretty heavy downpour. It was short, but it tin cup. And the time that I hit it, it's, I don't know, maybe like 7 p.m. So it's kind of right at dusk, which at night, if you're going into that and you're soaking wet, you're going to get cold. So both times I took, the couple of minutes to put my rain jacket on. It kept my core, my pack, me dry. It was only 10 minutes, but if I wouldn't have done that, I would have been soaking wet, into the night. So I think, it happened both years. So I think for me that was consistent.
Yeah, I would agree that trying to remember, I think every year I've had some amount of precipitation, some years more than others. Yeah, the rain jacket is key. Also, it can be windy up high at night, so the rain jacket kind of works as a wind protection there as well. I know people are often trying to shave micro ounces in their gear, but I like to have a rain jacket that's a size larger than I usually wear, because that way I can throw it on over the pack that I'm wearing. And it's just a bit easier when, you know, one less thing to have to sort of take on and off and deal with.
Kevin, what you got?
I don't have an answer for you.
You're fired.
But let me say
The reason you're not answering is because you're busy typing in the chat, man. I mean,
I'm
come on.
monitoring the chat because you're not. Come on. But this is maybe like a niche answer, but hopefully the other vets here will back me up. There's a unique condition that occurs late in the race, because if you look at the graph, like Caleb said, once you get to Monarch, it's butter, baby. You're gonna finish. But that CT, if you hit that any part of that in the daylight, by 7 o'clock, it's going to feel warm. And it's going to feel dusty, and you're going to be sucking dust. You're going to be tired. And there's not a lot of water there. There's almost no water, really. So if
There's
you're
three perennial creeks, but they're on average about 3 miles apart each.
Yeah. And I don't think there's really any water from the time you leave Raspberry till you like cross the bridge almost by the pavement. But if you're someone who suffers in the heat, in the sun exposure, and or you don't enjoy dust, be prepared to like mitigate that scenario at the end, whether that's, you know, wearing a wet bandana, carrying an extra half liter or liter of water, because I've gone dry actually in the last 7 miles before. I've left Raspberry with a liter and having just finished a half liter in the aid station and run out of water with like 2 miles to go. You do not want to be going up Swear Hill with no water. There's no shade whatsoever. The sun's on your back and there's cars flying by. You want to be as comfortable as possible going up that hill.
And the pavement radiates back right up underneath you too.
And there's a pool like 300 feet from the road.
Dude, the hot springs is the most insulting fucking thing on the entire course. Nothing says you're a dumb fuck like running 100 miles past a hot spring and watching a bunch of people on vacation having so much fun with their families. And you're just like, I picked this. I did this to me.
Yep.
Silke, I noticed that there's a Ryan lurking around your screen. Oh, hey, Ryan. For those that don't know, Ryan was a previous course record holder. He's running this year as well. Him and Silke are double downing for the second time in race history. Ryan, what's your I'm sure you've been hearing most of this, but what's your one thing you would drop in for folks listening?
Oh goodness, that's a loaded question. Make better decisions. That's what I'm kind of thinking right now. Third time. I really swore I wouldn't do it a third time, and here I am. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, everyone's saying very good advice. Don't fret too much, honestly. Everybody likes to kind of beat themselves up that they, you know, didn't do enough. But when you line up at the start line, just don't worry about that. You know, you did what you could in your busy lives. Just do what you can on the day and just try to stay kind of positive as much as you can, which is, you know, quite challenging. I tell myself this every race, and still I find myself in the doldrums, in the pity party. But you know, you're out there having fun. It's a great place, great views, great people. Just try and kind of enjoy the experience, I think, and then you'll have a good day. And you know, the altitude's going to get to you, the heat's going to get to you, something's going to get to you, because something always goes wrong in these long races. So you just got to keep making good decisions, try to solve the problems, and try fix them early. You know, if it's a foot issue, just stop. You know, don't kind of overthink things. Don't count the grams. Don't worry too much about it. Just be prepared. Bring the right gear. You know, don't fret too much about those details. You're all tough people. You'll all get to the finish. I'm pretty convinced of that. It's entirely doable for everybody, really. You know, so yeah, chin up, keep going forward.
Chin up in a British accent. It's got to be one of the most motivating things you can possibly hear, man. Yeah, no, I fantastic advice all around. Thank you all so much for jumping on and sharing all your hard-earned wisdom. So thank you guys for that. Kevin dropped his Instagram in the handle Brian, so okay, Suzanne, if you guys want to do the same for folks to reach out, if you got more specific questions, it's always a nice thing. You can also shoot them to me. We've got a pretty good list of people we can point questions towards if we don't know the answers ourselves. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, guys. We'll see you in the Swatch soon. And to move us along for the rest of tonight, we're going to kind of crash through this stuff because we got 3 big things and we're at a little over time already. So I'm going to kind of motor on these and get to our Q&A at the end. Next thing I wanted to cover was pace prediction. A lot of what we just talked about was, related to this, but I want to show you some options on how to help plan. So if you go to the High Lonesome website and you go to course and you scroll down just a little bit, there's these 2 buttons here called Plan Your Efforts. One of them is Open Split Time and one of them is Ultra Pacer. They both do similar things in slightly different ways. Open Split Time is the live tracking software that we use for during race day. So every single year of High Lonesome is in that database, and it gives us a lot of good extrapolation we can take from it. Ultra Pacer is a third-party website that came up a couple years ago. I used it when I was planning out my states run a couple years ago, and it worked really, really well. I liked it for a few reasons. So I'm going to show you a little bit about both of those. We're going to start with Open Split Time and end with Ultra Pacer. Open Split has this plan here. So you just hit Plan My Effort, and then you can enter a target time. So let's be conservative and say 30 hours. It's nice middle of the road. And it's going to generate you based on anybody else who ran within plus or minus some margin of time a 30-hour race. And what I like about Open Split Time's plan that it generates is specifically it shows you this in aid station time, which is an actual real life average of the time that people have spent in high-lows in those aid stations. The reason I think this is important is because most people that I talk to after the race always say, I can't believe how long I sat at this aid station or that aid station. Like Kevin talked about, don't sit at purgatory, right? I'll always say, don't sit at Hancock. You just got to get in and get out as fast as you can. But if you look at this generated time, this is real data. It's saying that a person running a 30-hour high-low spent almost 2 hours in aid stations, which is ludicrous. I mean, that's insane, but it's not. As dumb as this sounds, it's actually not insane. So I like Open Split Time because it gives you this real actual number. And this gives you a really nice cushion to say, okay, here it says I need to be in 16 minutes at Hancock, but I actually was only in there for 10. Well, great. Now I got 6 minutes in the bank. Same thing at, Monarch, 14 minutes there, but I was in and out in 7. Fuck yeah. You're good. So it's nice to have that. It also gives you a real life buffer that you may or may not need. For context, if you look at this is a 30-hour, that's an hour and 42 minutes. Let's say now we're going to jump to a 36-hour. And if you generate that plan, oh, I did the wrong button. Sorry. Generate that plan, it adds another 40 minutes of time in aid stations. So it gives you, similar deltas. But just look at this. The people who are running right at cutoffs are spending an extra 10 minutes at Hancock, almost 30 minutes at Hancock. And this isn't fake. This is literally people that it's comparing this plan for. So that's helpful. The downside with this is it's a bit linear because it doesn't take into account a lot of the course details. That's where Ultra Pacer has been trying to make some more gains on. And so here, you can hit this new plan button and you can set a time. So, it's just because we were just at 36 hours, let's go straight back to 36 hours. And then this you need to pay attention to. This is instead of doing what Open Split Time does and actually generating the average time in aid stations, this lets you set your generic time. So if you have an account, you can actually go in there and set specific aid stations. You could go in there and say, I plan on spending 1 minute at Antero, but 15 at Hancock. But without logging in, you just set a generic one. So let's just set that at 5 minutes. And then you generate it. And the nice thing about this is it actually kicks out, and it's also using splits. It's scraping open split time to generate its own stuff. So it's still using similar data. It's just processing with a different algorithm. But the nice thing here is that it gives you a little bit more of the topographical details in here. It also lists the cutoffs, gives you, I think, a little bit better actual, like I can screenshot this and print this and use this. I think open split times use of the aid stations makes it superior. What I actually ended up doing is I ran all three. I used, well, for states, sorry. When I did states, I used this, I used open split time, and I ran the states' own like splits they give, and I just averaged everything, and it worked really, really well. So this is a great place to start. I don't have a way to visually show you this simply, but half of the people who finish High Lonesome 100 finish it within 2 hours of cutoff. So from 35 to 37 hours. Half. That is insane. That is so much higher than most other races. If you are looking at this and you think, hell yeah, I'm good for 28, you need to have a backup for a 32 or something like that. And so I like to print multiple sheets. And I have A, B, and C, right? A's everything goes perfect. B's some amount goes wrong, and C is everything goes to hell, right? And I'm just walking everything. And it's nice to have those things because you can kind of revert midstream and not just be kind of floundering and saying like, oh, well, my whole plan went to shit. I don't know what to do now. You can easily just be like, okay, well, I got B. Okay, B went to crap. Now I got C. So it's nice to have backups, but you want to be a little more conservative, I think, for high-low than you would be for a lot of the other hard rock quals. So if you've run some of the other kind of like Intermountain West races that are at elevation to some extent, have similar terrain to some extent, then I think you want to add an hour or two to those times, and that's going to give you a really realistic finish. And you might well exceed that, but generally stuff bites you and you don't. So use these plans. They're not bulletproof, but they're a great place to start. It's a good way to help your crew also predict where you're going to be. All right. So next I want to talk about snowpack real quick. I put this in emails to you runners, but I just want to talk through how to use this real briefly. This is the Upper Arkansas Headwaters from the NRCS, which is the National Resource Conservation Service, which is a phenomenal federal agency that's getting raped right now by the federal government. And it's really sad. This program, thankfully, is still safe and it's still being monitored, but it shows you in real time the snowpack in the state of well, all the Western states, but specifically Colorado, and specifically our exact basin. This is helpful for you planning when you can come out and run. It's also helpful for you to correlate race reports you might find from friends or on the internet and say, okay, well, how does this year compare to that person's year that I'm reading? Because if you read a 2017 report, it rained for 36 hours. But if you read a 2019 report, or I guess it was 18 was the hottest year, it's nowhere near it. So this helps you contextualize how to interpret other people's experiences of this race. The way you do that, this black line is this year's snowpack. This green line right here is the median average, which has diminished by 40% over the last 80 years in the Arkansas because of climate change. But if you look at this, we're way down right here. The highest day of the snowpack is usually April 15th. We're a day out. Looking at where we are, this black line is noticeably below the green line. And if you look over here, it'll tell you what we are at. So we're at 87% of median. We're at 70% of the median peak, and we're in the 14th percentile, which is abysmal. So that's a bummer. Now you can go over to this side and you can start adding in historical years. So the first year of the race was 2017, which is a pretty standard year. So if you click on that, you can see actually, oh, it's not too bad, right? Like it was actually a little higher, quite a bit higher than where we were. And then the worst year we ever had was 19. That was a crazy winter. Look at that. It was all the way up here. So that's not super helpful. But if you look in the last couple of years, let's take those years away and just add 24, 23, and 22. You can see like we're relatively in line with those years. And so looking at recent, trip reports or talking to your friends who've run this recently, like you can probably say, well, we're looking fairly similar. but we are looking worse than those years. So if we get a lot of snow in the next 2 or 3 weeks, could change. But if it doesn't, we're looking at a pretty dry year. Beyond predicting, kind of how this compares to past years, this tool allows you to kind of guesstimate when you can run different sections of the course. So if you look down here, with a margin of about a week, these are all, even in the biggest year, we've always been dry at these snow gauge sites within about a week window. So we have a pretty good predictability that by the July 4th weekend, the CDT Continental Divide Trail section should be enjoyably runnable. It's runnable before that, but there's a lot of posts only. The CT is almost open now. Kelsey ran from the hot springs to kind of midway between Raspberry and Blanks, had some snow, some drifts, but it was like large stretches were melted out. So the next 2 weeks, you guys can probably get out here and start running the CT if you're in the area. And then the last thing to look at this is kind of how we're anticipating smoke or fire. High-low's early enough in the season that we don't have a ton of immediate fire risk. Like it is absolutely always possible that we have a fire in the course, on the course, around the course in July. It's not likely in most years. However, New Mexico tends to light up in May, and a lot of that smoke blows into us. And so it's possible that our AQI, or our air quality index, will be quite poor come the race day. So far, we've been very lucky, and we've had fairly good air quality for all of our events. We've only had 2 fires near the course, and they were all not close enough to threaten operations. So that's good. Amanda asked in the chat, rough open on Laws. It's really hard to tell. The Cottonwood side of Laws Pass has a very, very big cornice that forms. So cornice is a shelf of ice and snow that gets blown over a ridge, and then it creates a cliff that overhangs, and they tend to be quite dangerous because they can drop off and cause avalanches or debris flows. The Laws one, hard to say. If we don't get any snow in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be open sometime in early June. That would be my guess. If we get a lot of snow, it could hang on until like mid-June. But typically Laws is, I think, worth poking at earlier. So, okay, that's the snowpack. Last thing I want to talk about is crew and pacers, and then we're gonna wrap this up. So, like I mentioned several times today, we're going to have metering at Hancock. So last year we added metering to Cottonwood, which meant that crews could not go to Cottonwood until they reached a certain, the runner reached a certain place. So if you look at this, this is from last year. This is the Cottonwood crewing, which says it's shuttled and metered, right? So Cottonwood, you have to park below the aid station. We use a local 4-wheel drive club to shuttle crews up to that aid station because the road's too narrow. There's no parking above it. So in order for crews to reach Cottonwood, they have to go through a couple of hoops. Last year, about 40% of the race just opted not to go to Cottonwood because it was not really worth it. Frankly, you don't really need it. It's the 30K mark on 100. Like, it'd definitely be helpful, but given the hurdles and the parking constraints, like if you don't need a crew at Cottonwood, don't send them up there. Hancock, we're adding this year to be metered. It is not shuttled, so you will park at the aid station and walk to it. But there is terrible parking. It's really, really shitty. And actually, this view right here is from Chalk Creek looking back towards Hancock. Hancock's like kind of right down in there. And it is tough, man. There's not enough room for cars. And we're trying to manage public access because it's public land, so people can go there. The process for how Hancock will work very similarly to how Cottonwood currently works, where runners have to reach a certain checkpoint. At that point, the crews have to come back to the start-finish line, receive a pass specific for Hancock that then allows them to drive and park at Hancock. And that is 100% enforced. There is no loopholes on this. If you show up without a pass, you're getting turned around. That's it. So don't sleep on this. Now, to help, because I know this is not an ideal situation, normally just parking and walking to an aid station would be just fine, but this extra additional logistical burden is important. If we don't do this well, the race doesn't get to grow to 250. So we used to be at 150. We negotiated a 100-person increase, 25 people a year for 4 years, contingent on all of our Forest Service reviews coming back as positive. The number one concern that they have is impacts by crews, because crews cause more damage than anybody else in any race. So for us to continue to try to grow the race, another 25 runners, try to offset all this lottery odds bullshit that's making it really hard to get into high-low, we need this to go smoothly. So that's why we're doing this. That's why we need you guys and your crews to be locked in. And to help with that, we have these specific pages that tell you how we're going to do things. In June, we will do a crew meeting, which goes through the specifics and how these things will actually physically work. We ask all the questions. It's a great time for your parents and grandparents and friends who've never been at a race to come on and have a safe place to ask a bunch of, any type of question they might have. And then the hour before the pre-race meeting on Thursday before the race, we do a crew meeting, which is the same kind of thing as the virtual meeting, just in person. So people get to come up, they can ask us a bunch of questions, we can cover specifics, and we cover it. So there's a lot of steps beyond what's available on the website once it's updated for the Hancock information. But this is like the required gear for your pacers. This is on you guys. You guys are the captive audience. You're the people whose performance is dictating their behavior. So if you don't give them the tools they need to succeed, if you don't pick the right people to be in these positions that you're relying on, you're going to have a bad day. So do the legwork, hold their hands, help them out, pick the good people. Maybe don't bring some people because they're not quite cut out for this. That's okay. But be prepared. The number one thing I can say, besides using all of the information that we have on the website and using those 2 opportunities to show up and ask questions in real time, the number one thing that you can do is prepare all of the logistical things. Rent vehicles that are capable of driving on off, call it 4-wheel drive roads in terrible weather. Make sure that they've got food so they can eat. They've got equipment so they can sleep. Have an Airbnb that has comfortable, just hedge your bets, right? Mitigate risk as much as you can, because the number one thing you don't want to deal with during your race is someone else's problems. You have so many of your own you're going to be troubleshooting. So take the time, plan on it. I will have the Hancock information up by early June, probably not before that, but in early June, we will have that information up. Cottonwood will retain the same program we had last year, so that information is good to go. You can use that as is. And then Monarch, Blanks, and Raspberry 2, not 1, but Raspberry 2, are all a lot simpler processes. So you're still limited to 1 vehicle at any given aid station, but you don't have to get the parking passes specific for those. So it's a lot simpler, kind of more traditional for other 100 milers. All right. I know we kind of blitzed through that stuff at the end there, but that's all I had on my list. We're about 23 minutes later than I said we would be. So if you've lasted this long, thank you. If you have questions, I'm happy to hang out and keep answering them. Otherwise, you can drop them to me in an email, and I'm happy to answer them there once we're not quite as late at night. But yeah, thank you for everybody who jumped in and asked questions, people who came on to help us, Silke, Kevin, Suzanne, Ryan, Lauren, and Bill. Thank you to you guys. Yeah, that's it. Stoked for you guys to run. Thank you. And if you got questions, let's hear them. I'm gonna refill. I've been sipping on this really nice bottle of Laws while we've been talking, so I'm gonna have another. If you don't have questions, that's fine too. All right.
I have a quick question.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. I missed part of the meeting with some of the divide gear and stuff, so you may have already said this, but at Monarch, when the divide gear is checked, are they also rechecking the base gear? Or sorry, Cottonwood.
Yeah, so they check 100% of your required gear. So they will check the base gear at both Hancock and Cottonwood. So you know they have a complete list that just combines the two.
Okay, just checking. Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions?
Is there a best practice on how to kind of contain and store that gear?
Some, yeah. I mean, Kevin dropped in the chat that a really good tip, which is having your divide gear in waterproof something, a Ziploc or drop, stuff sack or something like that, because if your pack gets wet and your layers get wet, it's nice to have them be dry. It can make a significant safety difference, certainly a comfort difference. It sucks to pull all your gear out of a pack. I'm not going to sugarcoat it that you're going to not enjoy that. I like to put things in confined things. So I have these little Osprey stuff sacks that I shove my shell into, or I shove my layer and my buff into. And that way, when I pull it out, me in my race mode, not thinking super clearly, dehydrated, whatever, I can pull this out and be like, this is a shell, this is a glove, this is whatever and whatnot. So I like to do it that way, but I wouldn't say there's necessarily a best practice. It's specific to how you pack your pack, how you like to have your gear accessible. So yeah, I don't know. Does that help at all, Mike?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Delia asked, can you repeat what you said about crew parking at Monarch? So there is no metering to Monarch. So they don't have to go back to the start finish line like they have to for Cottonwood and Hancock. So when you guys check in at runner check-in, you get a parking pass that is valid for Monarch, Blanks, and Raspberry 2. And that literally just needs to be displayed on your dashboard when the parking attendant is parking you. That's it. And at Monarch, there's typically not even a parking attendant. So it's on the honor system there. Blanks does have parking attendants. So, don't try to screw the race over and bring 2 cars. But the parking at Hancock and Cottonwood will require a separate pass that we give you when you're able to go. So it's very controlled. There's no way to work around it. You couldn't just pitch up and be like, oh, I have the pass, because you literally have to come to the start and finish to get it. So to your question, Delia, they can go from Salida up to Monarch and back to Salida without needing to go to the start line. Same with Blanks and same with Raspberry 2. Any other questions? Cool. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you folks in person here in a few months. If you have questions in the interim, shoot me an email. And we'll see you in the Swatch soon. So take care, guys.
Thanks, dude.